In any field where you're working with clients to move forward in their lives or to grow in some way, you will be helping them establish specific goals that they may have for your time together. And I find that across many fields within health and human services and social services, practitioners and providers sometimes make the mistake of breezing over goal setting by just asking a question like, okay, what's your goal? And then we write it down and we move forward. And then they find themselves kind of scratching their heads and frustrated when the person isn't moving forward and making progress with the goal. Sometimes I try to help professionals in the field of health, human services, social services, etc., take a little step backwards and look at actually how the goal was set in the first place. Goal setting is a skill that I think we ought to take a deeper look at. So let's look here at some strategies for setting appropriate goals. And again, this goes beyond just asking a person, so what's your goal? They may come up with something that's a good start, but our job is to help them really flesh this out and decide what will we walk away with as an appropriate goal that is achievable and realistic. So the first tip I have here is that goals should be behavior oriented, not outcome oriented. Behavior is what we have control over. We don't have that much control over our, what I like to call hopeful outcomes. So if you ask a person, what is your goal? And the person says, well, my goal is to get a job. Well, you know what? That's a good start, but you only have so much control over whether you get a job or not. The behaviors that a person has control over are things like working on your resume, networking, applying for jobs, sharpening your interviewing skills. That is something that a person can control. Whether or not they ultimately get the job is something that we hope for. I hope the person can get a job, but it's not an appropriate goal if it's not something the person can control in the first place. So here, I have an example from my work. I don't see clients for health coaching so much anymore, but I have worked as a health coach, and sometimes clients would come to meet with me and they would say, hi, Kate, I'm here because my goal is to lose 100 pounds. And that's a fine, hopeful outcome. I'm okay with somebody keeping that in mind on the horizon, that that's something that they hope for. They hope the outcome of our work is losing 100 pounds, and I will write that down. But then I would ask the person, what is it that you need to do in order to lose 100 pounds? And what I'm trying to understand here is, what are the behaviors that this person might focus on? And that becomes closer to an appropriate goal. So maybe we come up with all kinds of things. Exercise, like taking walks after dinner, preparing meals in advance. Maybe they choose to count calories. There are all sorts of behaviors a person might choose to focus on. Let's imagine this person said, okay, well, I think in order to lose 100 pounds, what I have to do is I have to stop drinking soda. Okay, this is good because now we're on our way. We've made this hopeful outcome of weight loss something that is a behavior. This is something the person can control. Whether they drink a soda or not, the person has control over that. What shows up on the scale in their bathroom, they don't have that much control over that. But my next tip is that we try to set goals that are positive, not negative. So here we've gone from my goal is to lose weight to my goal is to stop drinking. Stop drinking soda. And I'd like to take that goal, which is sort of negative. I want to stop doing this thing, and we're going to turn it into something positive. What might the person start doing? And if you're thinking the way I'm thinking, the person might say, okay, well, instead of stopping drinking soda, I'll make my goal to start drinking more water. And again, we're getting even closer now. We started with an outcome of weight loss. We turned it into a behavior around what we're going to consume in terms of beverages. And then we turned it into something positive, something that we're going to begin doing rather than something we're going to stop doing. We find that people get a bit more excited about goals that are starting something new rather than rejecting or depriving myself of something I want. Quick story before I finish this last tip. Years ago, I was trying to lose a little bit of weight, and there was a sandwich shop that I used to go to. I don't think it even exists anymore. And when I would order a sandwich, they would ask me, which side would you like with your sandwich? And there were some healthy options and there were some not so healthy options. And when I was trying to lose weight, this was always a very difficult moment for me because I so badly wanted the not so healthy option. But I had this goal. I was trying to slim down a little bit, and it was a moment of torture in many cases. And I would sometimes choose the healthy thing, and I would sometimes not choose the healthy thing. A couple of weeks went by, and I wasn't making a lot of progress, and I was feeling really frustrated. And I decided to reframe my goals. Rather than I can't have junk food, I started to think of it as, let me see how many healthy things I can eat a day. And I started by trying to do at least 5 fruits and vegetables every day. And then I increased it to 6, and then I increased it to 7. And it became this kind of exciting goal. Let me see how many I can get in, rather than how much I can reject that candy bar or the donuts or things like that. And it became exciting. And then I realized this was working for me the first time I went to that sandwich shop and they said, which side would you like? And I was actually really excited to say, you know what, I'll take that little bag of baby carrots. I think that's a really good option. And it wasn't torture all of a sudden. It was kind of fun. In my mind, I was saying, check, I got another one. And that's just an anecdote about how helpful it can be to turn your goals into something positive rather than something negative. Now, the last tip here said goals should be specific, measurable, realistic, time-bound. You've heard those words before related to goal setting. So I would encourage you to take this where it says my goal is to start drinking more water, and then turn that into something that we can measure, just like I did with vegetables. I said I was going for 5 a day. Maybe with water, you say, 8 ounces every hour while I'm at work, or something like that. That is something that you can kind of keep yourself held to and offer a little bit of accountability. So let's try it again. Maybe somebody comes to you and says, well, my goal is to reduce my stress. Well, this sounds outcome oriented, so we need to make this behavior oriented. Maybe we change it to, okay, my goal is to stop taking on so much. I'm going to stop saying yes to things, and I'm going to stop volunteering. Okay, this is starting to sound more like a behavior, so we're on the right track, but it still sounds pretty negative. So now we need to take this and make it more positive. So maybe this person says, okay, my goal is to start putting myself first. I'm going to start saying yes to me, and that's what I'm going to focus on as my behavior. The next thing we need to do is to make that specific, measurable, realistic, and time-bound. So maybe the person says, I'm going to take 30 minutes to myself every morning before I get in the shower. And that's my time to remain calm and be at one with my thoughts and gather my emotions and check in with my heart for the day. And that is my time, and that's going to help me be more in touch with my needs and put myself first. 30 minutes every day before I take my shower. And that's how you set a goal that is not outcome oriented, it's not so negative, and it is awfully specific, measurable, realistic, and time bound. So here I just want to make a note about a concept that people often bring up, which is willpower. So it's not uncommon when I'm helping people establish goals for them to say, oh, well, it all sounds good now, but I just don't have any willpower. I can never stick to anything. So I want to show you this diagram because it maps out how a specific behavior goal, like the ones we just set on the last slide, can eventually turn into habits. And once they become habits, it actually doesn't require as much willpower to continue doing the behavior. And then once your habit sets in, you're on your way to hopefully achieving that outcome. So that's sort of the map that we're going through. The left-hand column are behavior goals, the middle is habits, and the right side is outcomes. And so as we go through examples, we're going to be moving left to right, left to right, left to right. And what I'd like to help you see is that all of us have willpower. All of us have some. Nobody has an unlimited amount. We all have a little bit of willpower. And when something is new, a new goal, a new behavior you're trying to change, it requires a lot of our willpower. And so you tend to eat up what you have in the tank for willpower at the very beginning of a change that you're trying to make. If you are able to withstand that beginning part, that where it's new and difficult and taking a lot of your willpower, you will eventually make it to the other side where it turns into an automatic habit, something you hardly even have to think about. You just do it. When I ask somebody, how's it going with exercise? They say, oh, well, I have no willpower. How's it going with cutting out snacks? Oh, I have no willpower. But when I say, how's it going with brushing your teeth? They look at me like, what? I don't have any problem brushing my teeth. Well, how come you don't have a problem brushing your teeth? It's because it's a habit. Because you get up out of bed and you go to the bathroom and you brush your teeth. You don't have to set up some kind of accountability. You don't have to have a partner check on you. I doubt you're going to a support group for brushing your teeth. You do it with ease. You do it with ease because it's a habit. It would actually be harder not to do it at this point because you'd have to break the habit. The trick with behavior change is to turn all of these things that we ought to be doing into habits. So let's start on the left-hand side. The top behavior goal says maybe this person establishes a goal of tracking food in a journal. Great. Now, once they are able to get through that period of time where it's hard to remember and they don't feel like doing it and they skip a few days and blah, 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 there's that tough part. Eventually, they get to a point at which that journal is just like a part of them and they're tracking their food with ease. No one needs to remind them to track their food. It doesn't feel like a hardship. And eventually they get into the habit of just eating healthier foods. They may not even need the journal. It just becomes a habit. And when that becomes a habit, you're setting yourself up very well to hopefully achieve that outcome on the right-hand side, where maybe the outcome is weight loss, maybe the outcome is reduced risk of chronic health problems. Who knows? There may be all sorts of outcomes of eating better. But it starts with a specific behavior goal and using up that willpower that, believe it or not, you do have, getting through that difficult period and turning it into a habit. Now, the common question I get is, how long is that difficult period? You're going to hear all sorts of things. Some people say 3 weeks. Some people say 30 days. Some people say there's a bunch of theories. Let's just say it might vary and we don't really know. There's not a hard science to this. But know that it's temporary. Know that it's brief. It's not forever. So if you yourself, who are listening to this video, are trying to change something in your life, and you're trying to get better at something, maybe you're trying to quit smoking, maybe you're trying to apply for new jobs. At the beginning, it's tough. You have to trust that once you get through that beginning period, it gets so much easier and your willpower can be saved for other things that you need to do. You won't have to empty your willpower tank anymore once it becomes a habit. So the next example in the middle row, but we're going to start on the left-hand column, behavior goal says set a weekly budget and do not exceed it. That's a behavior goal. That's not an outcome. That's a behavior that you can focus on. Once you get really good at that, it becomes a habit, and eventually you're just a more frugal spender. Maybe you don't even need to track every expense in a budget. Maybe you're just better about spending after it becomes a habit. And if you become that way and you change the way that you spend in a more long-term way, you might achieve the outcome on the right-hand side where it says buy a house or pay off a bill. The last example is in the bottom row, but again, we're going to start in the left-hand column where it says behavior goal. Maybe a student in my class says, my behavior goal is I'm going to study 5 hours every week, just studying for 5 hours every week. And after a while, you might not need to measure it. You might not need to plan for it. Maybe your habit becomes you just consistently make time for studying. After a while, you get used to prioritizing this. You get used to saying no to the happy hour or the birthday party and making time for studying. And if you're able to do that, then the outcome you might find is something like maybe you earn an A in the course. But you don't have control over the outcomes. These are the things that you hope for. You have control over the left-hand column, and you can work on those things until they become habits. And when they become habits, you can hope that they become outcomes. So I've put in the red box here the column around habits. This is where willpower is not as necessary. You won't need your willpower so much once you can turn that behavior goal into a habit. It's the left-hand column where you have to dig deep for that willpower that you may not believe you have, but you do.